There is a forest in Japan where compasses do not work, where the trees grow so dense and so twisted that the sky disappears completely, and the silence, not the ordinary silence of a forest between birdsongs, but a deeper, heavier, older silence, presses against you like something physical. A forest where, if you stray from the path, you will find things hanging from the branches, personal items left on the ground, notes written in Japanese and weighted down with stones. A forest where every year Japanese authorities conduct a search, not for animals, not for lost hikers, for people who went in and chose not to come out. This is Aokigahara, 14 square kilometers of ancient forest at the base of Mount Fuji, in one of the most beautiful and sacred landscapes in Japan, and one of the most psychologically disturbing places on the surface of the earth. This is not a horror story. It is not a ghost story, though ghost stories surround it like the trees surround the path. It is a story about a place where the boundary between the human mind and the natural world becomes very thin, where the history of a landscape and the psychology of the people who enter it have become so deeply intertwined that neither can be fully understood without the other. And it asks a question that science and folklore and psychology have all tried to answer, and none of them fully have. What does a place do to the people inside it? Aokigahara did not begin as a dark place. Like all the most genuinely unsettling things in the world, it began as something beautiful. The forest formed approximately 1,200 years ago after a massive eruption of Mount Fuji in 864 CE deposited a vast field of hardened lava across the northwestern base of the mountain. Over the centuries that followed, trees took root in the cracks and hollows of that lava field. They grew slowly, patiently, in the way that trees grow in volcanic soil, not in straight lines, not in orderly rows, but twisted and gnarled and interlocked, their roots running across the surface of the ancient lava because the rock beneath them is too hard to penetrate deeply. The result is a forest unlike almost any other. The trees do not grow upward in the normal way. They grow sideways, they grow in spirals, they reach around each other with the slow deliberateness of things that have been competing for light and space for 1,000 years. The canopy above is so thick and so complete that almost no direct sunlight reaches the forest floor. The light that does filter through is green and diffuse and shadowless, a light that gives the forest interior the quality of being underwater, or of existing in a space slightly outside the normal world. The lava field beneath the thin soil creates an uneven, treacherous ground, full of hidden caves, sudden drops, passages into dark spaces below. In some places, the rock has formed hollow chambers that amplify sound in strange ways. In others, the density of the magnetic iron-rich lava disrupts the magnetic field at ground level, which is why compasses give unreliable readings inside the forest, and why the trails are marked with painted ropes and colored tape rather than signposts. Geographically, physically, this is a place of genuine strangeness. But the strangeness that Aokigahara is known for is not geological. It is human. The association between Aokigahara and death is old, older than the modern crisis, older than the 20th century. In the folklore and folk memory of the region, the forest has long been associated with yurei, the spirits of the dead. Specifically, the spirits of people who died in states of extreme emotional suffering, rage, grief, hatred, despair. In traditional Japanese belief, a person who dies in such a state may not pass peacefully to whatever lies beyond. Their spirit remains, tethered to the location of their death or to the object of their unresolved emotion, unable to move on. Aokigahara, in this tradition, is a place where such spirits accumulate. not because there is anything supernatural in the soil or the rock, but because of what happened there. There is a historical practice known in Japanese as ubasute, the abandonment of elderly or sick family members in remote places during times of severe famine when there was not enough food to sustain everyone. Historians debate the extent to which ubasute was actually practiced, as opposed to being a literary and folkloric concept. But the forest at the base of Mount Fuji features prominently in stories and literature about this practice, and the image of the forest as a place of abandonment, of people left to die alone among the trees, is embedded in the cultural memory of the region. In 1960, a Japanese novelist named Seicho Matsumoto published a book called Nami no To, Tower of Waves. In it, two characters, caught in a hopeless love affair, enter Aokigahara together and do not come out. The novel was enormously popular. It went through dozens of printings. It became a part of Japanese cultural consciousness. And in the years after its publication, the number of people who entered Aokigahara and did not come out began to rise. This is a documented pattern, not a coincidence, not a correlation that researchers have disputed. A direct, traceable, statistically significant increase in fatalities in the forest following the publication of a novel that portrayed the forest as a place of tragic, romantic finality. A story changed a place, or revealed what the place had always been, or both. Let's step back from the darkness for a moment and talk about what psychological science actually understands about the relationship between environment and the human mind. Because the question at the center of Aokigahara, the question of whether a place can affect the psychological state of the people who enter it, is not a mystical question. It is a scientific one, and the science has some unsettling answers. Environmental psychology is a field that studies exactly this relationship. And what it has found, consistently, across decades of research, is that our physical environment has a profound, measurable, largely unconscious effect on our mental and emotional states. Natural light, or the absence of it, affects the production of serotonin and melatonin in the brain. The regulation of mood, of sleep, of the sense of temporal orientation, where you are in the day, in the season, depends heavily on light. A person who spends extended time in a space where natural light is absent or severely reduced may experience measurable changes in mood, in cognitive function, in the sense of connection to the world outside that space. The soundscape of an environment matters. Silence, real silence, the deep silence of a space where human-generated sound is absent and even natural sound is suppressed, has been shown in research to produce elevated states of physiological stress in some individuals. Not relaxation, stress. The human nervous system evolved in an environment full of sound, and the absence of expected sound can register as a threat signal. The visual complexity of a landscape affects the brain's processing load and, consequently, mood. Environments that are visually confusing, where the eye cannot easily find depth cues or reference points, where the normal landmarks that the brain uses to orient itself spatially are absent, produce a state of mild, persistent cognitive disorientation that affects decision-making and emotional regulation. Aokigahara has all of these characteristics simultaneously. No direct sunlight. Profound silence. Not peaceful silence, but the silence of a space where normal acoustic reference points are absorbed by the dense canopy and the irregular lava ground. A visual environment of extraordinary complexity and disorientation, where every direction looks like every other direction, where the twisted trees provide no useful navigational cues, where the ground is uneven and full of hidden drops. The forest does not cast spells. It does not call to the unhappy. It does not have the supernatural quality that folklore assigns to it. But it creates conditions that, for someone already in psychological distress, can intensify that distress in measurable, comprehensible, and deeply dangerous ways. The people who patrol Aokigahara are called volunteer searchers, and they conduct formal searches of the forest every year. The Japanese government stopped publicizing the specific annual numbers several years ago, a decision made specifically to reduce the forest's notoriety and the association of the place with a particular kind of loss. But the volunteers continue their work. They go into the forest in organized teams, moving slowly, checking the places they know from experience to check, carrying what they need to carry back out. Some of them have been doing this for decades. The man most associated with this work, a man named Azusa Hayano, a geologist who has spent much of his professional life studying the forest and who has walked its paths more times than he can count, has spoken publicly and carefully about what the work is like. He describes the forest as deeply strange, in the way that only someone who knows it well can describe it. Not frightening exactly, not malevolent, but heavy. He describes the silence as the most notable characteristic. Not peaceful, something more pressured than peace. A silence that seems to accumulate, layer upon layer, from everything the forest has witnessed over 1,000 years. He describes finding people in the forest. Not always those who cannot be helped. Sometimes people who are sitting among the trees, uncertain, not yet decided. And those people, those encounters in the silence and the green light, he describes with a particular care. Because those are the moments when a single human presence, a single voice in the silence, a single person, willing to sit down and stay a while, can change what happens next. He has spoken to people in the forest. He has sat with them. He has walked them out. He has not saved everyone he has encountered, but he has saved some. The psychological mechanics of what happens to a vulnerable person in an environment like Aokigahara are not fully mapped. But research on what psychologists call place identity and environmental priming gives us a framework. Human beings form emotional associations with places, strong ones, persistent ones. These associations operate largely below conscious awareness. They are processed by the limbic system, the ancient emotional brain, before the reasoning mind has time to evaluate them. When you enter a space that carries strong cultural and symbolic associations absorbed through stories, through folklore, through the accounts of others who have been there, those associations prime your emotional state before you have taken a single step on the path. For someone who enters Aokigahara already in distress, already searching, consciously or not, for a final resolution to unbearable pain, the weight of the forest's reputation, the quality of its light and silence, the sensation of being enclosed in something ancient and indifferent may act as a kind of mirror. The forest does not bring darkness. It reflects the darkness that comes in with the person who enters it, and it amplifies it. That is the genuine psychological horror of Aokigahara. Not what it is, but what it does to what you bring inside. There are other elements of the forest that deserve acknowledgement. Things that do not fit easily into the framework of environmental psychology or cultural priming. Things that researchers note with a kind of careful, reluctant precision. The magnetic anomalies in the forest are real. The iron-rich lava beneath the soil generates a disruption of the local magnetic field that is measurable with instruments. This is why compasses fail. It is documented. It is geological. But what does a disrupted magnetic field do to the human body? The honest answer is, we are not entirely sure. There is research suggesting that the human brain has some sensitivity to magnetic fields, that disruptions in magnetic environment may affect circadian rhythms, may produce subtle neurological effects, may contribute to the kind of spatial disorientation that makes the forest so difficult to navigate. The extent of these effects in humans is debated. The research is not conclusive. But the question is real, and the anomaly is real, and the combination of a magnetically disrupted environment with everything else that characterizes Aokigahara, the light, the silence, the visual complexity, the cultural weight, is not a combination that anyone has fully studied in terms of its cumulative effect on human psychology. We know the pieces. We do not fully understand the whole. Here is what the people who work to support mental health in Japan have said, consistently, for many years. The forest is not the problem. The forest is where a problem that exists in the world outside the forest sometimes arrives. The pain that enters Aokigahara came from somewhere else. It was born in circumstances of loneliness, of economic despair, of social pressure, of mental illness inadequately treated, of suffering inadequately witnessed. Japan has, in recent decades, worked intensively to address mental health, to reduce the stigma around seeking help, to increase the availability of support, to create the kind of social infrastructure that catches people before they arrive at the edge of the forest. Signs have been placed at the entrance to Aokigahara with messages, not warnings, not rules. Messages that speak directly to a person in pain. That say, in plain language, your life has value. There are people who will listen. Please call before you walk further in. Some people read those signs and turn around. Some people call the numbers on them and speak to someone who listens. And some walk past. The forest cannot be changed. The silence cannot be removed. The history cannot be erased from the cultural memory. The twisted trees and the dark canopy and the ancient volcanic rock will be there long after every human being alive today is gone. But the people who enter the forest in pain, they are not determined by the forest. They are not fated. They are people in pain who need what every person in pain needs. To be found, to be heard, to be told by another human being who means it, stay. Let's talk about what Aokigahara actually is when you stand inside it on an ordinary morning. When you walk the marked paths as a visitor, with the colored rope guiding you and the light coming through the canopy in that strange, green, underwater quality. It is beautiful. It is strange and ancient and unlike any other forest in the world. The trees are extraordinary, shaped by 1,000 years of competing for survival in volcanic rock. They have developed forms that no botanical illustration prepared you for. The moss is thick and vivid, covering every surface with a softness that seems out of place in the hard volcanic landscape beneath. The silence is real. You notice it immediately. It is not the silence of emptiness. It is the silence of a space where ordinary sound has been absorbed, contained, swallowed. Even your own footsteps are quieter than they should be. And the clouds. On many mornings, the cloud base sits exactly at the altitude of the forest, and you walk through a mist that reduces visibility to a few meters, that closes off the distance, that makes the world outside the forest feel very far away. It is, in its way, one of the most remarkable natural environments on Earth. A place where the lava of a medieval volcanic eruption became a forest canopy, where the roots of trees hold the memory of every season for 1,000 years, where the mountain above is sacred and the forest below is ancient, and the combination of the two creates something that does not exist anywhere else. Aokigahara deserves to be understood in its full complexity. not just as the dark place of its reputation, not just as a geographical landmark of tragedy, but as a place that holds, within its silence and its strange green light, the full weight of what it means to be human in a difficult world. The suffering that enters this forest is human suffering. The darkness that it reflects is human darkness. And the signs at the entrance, those simple, direct, quietly urgent messages to a person in pain, those are human too. The most human thing in the forest. The voice that says, "You are not alone in here. You never were." There is a practice among some visitors to Aokigahara that is worth knowing. They walk in with a length of colored thread, and as they walk, they unwind it behind them, not just as a navigational tool, but as a kind of promise to themselves. A physical thread connecting them to the entrance, to the world outside, to the path back. It is a simple thing, practical and ancient and human. The myth of Theseus in the labyrinth restated in a Japanese forest in the shadow of Mount Fuji. And it says something important. The forest is not a trap. It is not a destination of no return. People go in and come back out every day. The marked paths lead in and they lead out again. The light at the entrance is always there, even when you cannot see it. The thread is not magic, but the act of carrying it, the deliberate, conscious decision to maintain a connection to the world outside while you are inside, is a small, quiet act of self-preservation that says, "I intend to come back." Hold on to your thread, whatever forest you are walking through. If this story moved you, if it made you think about someone you know who might be carrying something heavy, reach out to them. Today, not tomorrow. And if you are the one carrying something heavy right now, please know that you do not have to carry it alone. There are people who will listen. In every country, in every language, there is a voice waiting to hear yours. Subscribe. Because some stories are not told to entertain. They are told because the world needs more people who are willing to sit with difficult things and not look away.